Welcome to Sports Hub STL. I'm Stefan, Caray, Brenden, Schaeffer joining me, Matthew Rocchio behind the scenes. What a night for the Cardinals. And it was a tough one for St. Louis. A doubleheader where they fall in both games, one in extras, and then just a bludgeoning by the Boston Red Sox. This is the Cards Hub post-game show here, of course, on the STL Sports Hub. The Cards Hub post-game show is brought to you by Hot Shots. St. Louis is home for all the games, all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshots.net or hotshotsnet.com, and by DraftKings, who are a title sponsor. The crown is yours. So, Brenden, I mean, it was just a tough outing for St. Louis tonight. After dropping a game in extras, they lose 18-7 in Game 2 of the Twin Bill. 3 innings for Boston, scoring 4 or more runs. They were just crushing the ball all over the diamond. Miles Mikolas struggled early. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that's a tough one. It's a series sweep, and I blame Matt Rocchio. I did have to send the tweet. Sweeps aren't that hard. Just play. Unfortunately, today, the Cardinals. Stefan, they were so close in that first game to really getting the day off to a strong start. You had the guy you wanted to see on the mound in Ryan Helsley, and it just wasn't his day at the office. And then to obviously lose that game in extras and then have the game tonight on the Sunday Night Baseball telecast where they just didn't have a chance from the word go. And you appreciate that the lineup was still putting up a fight to the very end there. The Sajacy homer is nice to see. But, man, the 18 runs, I think, are a continuation of maybe some of the pitching concerns that have begun to develop in recent days, not only from a starting pitching perspective, which obviously Miles Mikolas didn't have a great day, and I'm sure the comments will have a lot to say about that. You can comment, by the way. Just subscribe to Sports Hub STL, and you'll be able to comment right away once you do so. The bullpen, too, though, Stefan, it's a challenge. We can acknowledge anytime you're playing 2 games in one day, it's going to be a challenge to figure out the pitching plan. But when every guy pretty much that Oliver Marmol sends out there has a tough day at the office, so to speak, it gets difficult. We saw more of Gordon Graceffo than you probably wanted to have to see today, knowing that he was the 27th man for the doubleheader, trying to find a way to give them some length and some innings out of the bullpen. And unfortunately, he's only able to get through 3, got hit around a little bit. It was John King's turn. And you did see Chris Roycroft come on in the garbage time to be able to finish things out. But, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what Cardinals fans are going to be feeling about this one, Stefan, is the pitching. We've seen the lineup look really solid so far this year for St. Louis. Honestly, probably above expectations. But if the Cardinals don't have the pitching to be able to support that lineup, it's going to be a little bit rough to see how they proceed as a winning club, which over the first week they were. And, now they're they're going through it a little bit.
Absolutely. And I mean, to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, 20 runs in the 7th inning or later to start the month of April for the St. Louis Cardinals. It has not been easy sailing for their relief. And Ryan Helsley today in an unexpected position. When he doesn't have that fastball working, he's got to lean on his slider. The hitters are sitting on that fastball, and they were all over it. They knew it was out of the zone. They were able to take their base and really keep the line moving and play station to station. Miles Mikolas, on the other hand, I mean, looking at him as one of these guys that is known as an innings eater, 170 innings or more in 5 of his last 6 seasons, just to see him unable to do that in a crucial spot where that Palante couldn't go longer than 4 1/3 earlier. I mean, that I think was the crushing blow for St. Louis in Game 2.
And it was. And look, I don't know that that's going to be necessarily a topic that's going away anytime soon. As Brian commented, said he's at DEFCON 3 on the pitching right now, maybe going up inside of a week, though. And, of course, the DEFCON system, for those unfamiliar, 5 is okay. That's where you want to be. But as you kind of trend toward DEFCON 1, that's an indication that people are getting a little bit concerned. 11 hits allowed by Miles Mikolas. It's not that he was giving up a bunch of free passes. That was the problem for Ryan Helsley. And you mentioned the fastball. We've seen times where Ryan Helsley doesn't have a great feel for that fastball and can sort of lean on the slider as something to be his, if you will, his get-out-of-jail-free card. Today, though, it seemed like the slider was also not cooperating for him. And I also kind of wondered, you get into that 0-2 count with Devers and you throw a good one, a slider below the zone, and he doesn't chase. But from there, they maybe stuck with that a little bit too long. And then by that point, it was whatever momentum Helsley had found with the fastball seemingly dissipated. So that was a little bit disappointing to see. But to your point about Miles Mikolas, it's not that he wasn't throwing strikes. We know he's a strike thrower, but it's just not something that's particularly difficult right now for opposing batters to be able to get good wood on and barrel him up. number of hits he gave up. And I even thought in his first outing of the season, Stefan, and look, I'm sure a lot of the comments are going to be pertaining to Mikolas, and we do welcome them. You can get your comments into the live chat. I looked at Mikolas and I'm saying it just feels like the pitches are telegraphed. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if that's great analysis, but it feels as though right now, whatever it is with his pitching motion, it's not about tipping pitches. It's just about, I feel like the timing for hitters is very fortuitous to be able to kind of time up what he's throwing, and they're having a field day. I had concern coming in because this Boston lineup is tougher than the one Mikolas saw his first time around. And by the end of the day, 18 runs maybe prove that point, Stefan. And you're just kind of in a spot right now where it feels like the Cardinals are spiraling a little bit because of the way that this series went. And you obviously didn't win the Angels series either, but they were so darn close to being able to start this doubleheader off on the right foot. That's where I feel like the signs are still there of a Cardinals team that could be having momentum right now, but certainly the pitching, I think, is a big reason that it's been squandered to this point.
Well, if you look back at their 5 games that they've played the month of April, 3 of them they've gone to extra innings in, and they've been competitive. The issue has been finishing those games. They've started fine. They've trailed quite a bit. They've allowed a lot of first inning runs. I mentioned the runs in the 7th inning or later. But would you agree with maybe the notion that tonight Miles Mikolas was a victim of throwing too many strikes rather than too few?
Yeah, and I think that's not uncharacteristic for him, right? There have been kind of the jokes made even within the Cardinals of like, all right, those 0-2 counts, like that was the situation for him last year. You get into the 2-strike counts, and you'd like to think there's a put-away pitch there somewhere. You can get batters to expand the zone. Stefan, I don't know if there's anything Mikolas can do about it, because right now it doesn't feel as though batters necessarily need to expand the zone against him, because when it's in there and when it's a hittable pitch, it's something they just seem to be able to time up. They're waiting for what they're looking for and ultimately able to find it more often than not. And again, he had a good outing his first time out. So I'm not necessarily waving this white flag on Miles Mikolas. I will say this, for the Cardinals fans that are frustrated at this point, I am understanding of the idea that things could be a little bit different this year. Circumstances could be considered a little bit different than in past years when a pitcher would struggle. For him, and I would even say with Steven Matz, those guys are in the final year of their contracts. It's early April at this point, and so I don't think the Cardinals are looking to make moves. And you also don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. You don't want to necessarily say, oh, we've got plenty of pitching. We can afford to take a veteran and cast them aside for a young player. Look at those guys in Memphis. Not all of them necessarily performing right now either. You want to be able to get through the month of April healthy. I think that's the main thing. And so there's going to be a little bit of a runway here for a Miles Mikolas. But at the end of the day, I do think there comes a point in time this season where if more of the outings look like this than the first one, where he was able to get the Cardinals through a good chunk of that game and give them a solid chance to win, I do think this is a year where you possibly start to accelerate the conversations about end game when it comes to making roster decisions and how that goes. Like I said, Stefan, early for that, but I know Cardinals fans are talking about it tonight, so just wanted to kind of give my take on that situation here.
Yeah, I agree with you, certainly, Brenden, about that. And I think this year what's different for the Cardinals is they have more organizational depth in the starting pitching role. They have Michael McGreevy and, of course, Quinn Matthews, who was the minor league pitcher of the year last year. And those guys are putting pressure on maybe the veteran starters in the rotation for the Cardinals. But another little interesting stat tonight, 18 batted balls for the Red Sox, 100 miles per hour or more exit velocity. 19 is the StatCast record. That was from Red Sox Stats and Info. And that's just really telling of what the game was like. It wasn't a high walk affair for the Cardinals pitching staff. The Red Sox were just hitting the ball all over the diamond. And I think that a lot of it has to do with momentum. At the end of that first game of the doubleheader, the Red Sox, they smelled blood in the water, and they were circling in more ways than one for game 2. The Cardinals score 1 in the top of the first. Red Sox answer in the bottom of the first, then have 5 in the second. From that point on, it really felt like Boston had controlled the narrative of this game. But looking at this day as a whole, the Cardinals lost more than one game. They lost a player in Ivan Herrera. I know they talked about it a little bit earlier today on the post-game show previous to game number 2. What do you think the answer is there moving forward for the Cardinals? Is it Joel Pozo? Is it Jimmy Crooks? Or maybe something creative with a free agent?
I think the bottom line, Stefan, is, and I'm going to hesitate to say it, but I'll say it anyway, based on the reports that came out during the Sunday night telecast, like maybe sigh of relief territory when it comes to Ivan Herrera, because if you saw the way that he left the field, I was imagining the worst, a potential season-ending injury, whether it would have been Achilles or ACL or whatever it might have been. They end up telling us it's knee inflammation. And then the word seems to be at this point that from Ollie Marmol, IL stint is going to happen. The Cardinals are going to be out without this player for a little while, but perhaps not something that's going to cost him quite such a chunk of the season as initially feared, at least as I was watching at home. When you see two members of the staff basically carrying Ivan Herrera off the field, that was not the sight you want to see for a player that basically has been one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball. When you look at slugging and OPS, and Ivan Herrera has finally, been getting the opportunity for the most part to be able to blossom at the plate, and he's done a marvelous job. But now you kind of have to question, what does that look like? Because Ivan Herrera was a guy they were trying to get a lot of opportunity for. Pedro Pages, can carry the load. But Wilson Contreras has been, siphoned off to that first base position. You're going to need another catcher in the organization. I don't think if it's a shorter term, even if it's a month and a half for Ivan Herrera, I don't think you suddenly go, hey, by the way, Wilson, I know you didn't catch all spring, but let's get you back in the gear. I think you do probably promote from within, whether that ends up being a veteran that you sign, somebody that you acquire on the fly for a short-term stint. I would be okay with the Cardinals kind of going through their Rolodex, Stefan, into recent history, catchers that they've had that are familiar with the system that could be made available for cheap. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but that's also me saying that without knowing specifically what the length of time for Herrera's absence is going to be. But they're certainly going to miss his bat in the lineup, Stefan. That's the main thing. I mean, his defense was coming along, but the bat that he was carrying, you look at I'm just looking at the postgame, the 18-7 loss this evening. Nootbaar, Baker, Donovan, Arenado, Sajaci, Jordan Walker, Pages, all with an OPS of 875 or better for the season. That is a large swath of players that have been really putting bat to ball for this Cardinals team. So it's a shame that the record isn't better than it is. And, of course, we're talking about the pitching tonight, but that's sort of where I come down on this, that you want to make sure that lineup is continuing to look as good as it has. Herrera will be a piece that's missed within that. But I think you kind of let Pages take the lead on this situation and almost bring in somebody, whether it's promoting from within or from the outside, that for the interim you believe can be his backup, so to speak.
Well, the bottom of the order for the Cardinals has really been getting it done so far this season. But you look at Pages coming off the bench, driving home 3, giving the Cardinals the lead with a ringing double off the monster. Of course, they couldn't end up finishing off the Red Sox in Game 1 of the doubleheader, but he can more than carry his own and hold his own when he's in there offensively. And defensively, he's probably right now a better option than Herrera behind the plate in terms of pitch calling, in terms of controlling the run game. So I think that the Cardinals fans should be happy that they have a capable backup. The question is who's going to be the backup for Pages now? But turning our eyes forward a little bit more toward what's next, upcoming Pittsburgh Pirates this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This is a huge series for the Cardinals trying to get back into not only the division, but get back into rhythm after sweeping the Twins, losing 2 out of 3 to the Angels, and then being swept by the Red Sox. This is huge. Your first National League play. What do you see for this series, and what's essential for the Cardinals to get a series win against Pittsburgh at PNC Park?
And look, I think another aspect of this, Stefan, is you think about the first turn through the rotation, things were pretty solid. You had all 5 starters do their job. Now we're still in the midst of this second turn through where things have gotten a little rockier. Tomorrow you finish it up with Matthew Liberatore, finishing up that second chapter of the rotation. And his first start was very interesting, where he started out looking really, really solid, but then hit a bit of a wall in the 3rd inning. And to his credit, was able to find it back, even as he kind of talked about, the velocity dip, that's something I was aware of, and he was finding a way to work around it. But what does the next iteration look like for Matthew Liberatore, a guy the Cardinals are giving that opportunity to in the rotation? They want to see what he's made of because, frankly, whether you think it's transition year related or that he's the best guy for the job right now, he's somebody that I think by 2026, if he's in your rotation because he proved it this year, that is a boon for the Cardinals front office as they're looking to figure out things moving forward. So what does Liberatore end up looking like can be an element of this, Stefan, that sets a tone for the series, because after that, you're facing Paul Skeens on Tuesday and then Mitch Keller on Wednesday afternoon. That Pittsburgh lineup may not be quite as robust as what you saw in the Boston Red Sox, but they do have some starting pitchers to throw at you. And if they're able to neutralize the Cardinals lineup, which has been red hot recently, that is an aspect of this where suddenly you can find things getting away from you. You figure, okay, in Boston, the lineup was still continuing to click, but the pitching didn't get it done. You'd hate to see the pitching kind of turn things around, but then the Cardinals run into a couple of tough starters. Lineup's got to continue to churn when they go to PNC Park. But you're going to need that out of Matthew Liberatore as well tomorrow to be able to set the tone.
Well, and the silver lining of all this, I know it's been a really difficult night for Cardinals fans, is that the Pirates have been outscored by more runs than any other team in Major League Baseball. They're tied with the Milwaukee Brewers in that category. They've been outscored by 22. So St. Louis is going to go in against a team that has given up runs and has struggled to score them in the early goings of this season. And if their offense can continue to put up 10 or more hits like they have done in every single game, I think they have a lot of fun at PNC Park. But again, it's the Pirates. It's a division foe. It's PNC Park. It's an excited fan base that knows the Cardinals are coming into town, and we'll see how they handle that. But the Cardinals have the luxury of having their ace going against the Pirates' ace, their number 2 going against the Pirates' number 2, and Matthew Liberatore getting back into the swing of things, being a starter this season for St. Louis and not coming out of relief. I'm curious to see how Ollie Marmol will assemble his lineup now with Ivan Herrera as the departure, with Thomas Saggese hitting a big 3-run home run in the 9th inning. Credit to the Cardinals in this one, even though they fall 18-7, they have fought tooth and nail offensively in the later stretches of these games. They give you a finish. They might not always give you a start, but they're going to give you a finish, and I think that's going to pay dividends down the road this season.
And you have to hope so. I do think, though, at the end of the day, it's not coming without this pitching staff turning things around. And what you also have to recognize, too, is the bullpen is taxed after a doubleheader today. Now, again, a guy like Schaeffer coming in and just sort of having to eat it for a few innings, even when it was clear that he, like Mikolas, didn't necessarily have his best stuff. You just had to do it that way to be able to look ahead to a Pittsburgh series to figure out a way to get through. And so the bullpen is going to be a consideration, but that's all the more reason that you can't afford a 4-inning outing from Matthew Liberatore tomorrow. You have to find a way, if you're Libby, to get deeper, and then the relievers that have something in the tank for this next series find a way to deliver, because if not, again, you're in that situation where I think you're looking at the offense right now and saying, my goodness, this feels like if you just gave me the offensive stats for this Cardinals team, you'd be feeling like they're in a really, really good spot in the standings. And they're not in a terrible spot because of the wins that they racked up in the opening series against the Twins, but it's definitely been trending in the other direction over the past week or so, and the Cardinals are going to have to find a way to find their level, frankly. But real quick, Stefan, I want to let people know that the Sports Hub STL content is brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours, and you still have one night left to turn your college basketball knowledge into cash today on DraftKings Pick 6, where new players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly with just $5 entry. And DraftKings Pick 6 is now available in Missouri, which is where probably a decent amount of our listening audience is. So download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
So we'll see, Stefan, where things end up going right now for this pitching staff. And I don't know. I know that fans are upset probably, and let me take a look at the comments to see if we can see anything that we can put on the screen, because it is the ASMR typing. People are apparently hearing my typing, which is good. And Stefan, people are obviously in a great mood. They think Paul Skeens will no-hit the Cardinals. I have to be honest. I am looking forward to seeing Paul Skeens, even if it comes maybe at the expense of the Cardinals. He is somebody that it is appointment viewing anytime you get the opportunity to do so. And now we've got a comment about Herrera's defense not really coming around, can't throw, and maybe has to change positions in a matter of time. What I'll say there, Stefan, is that it has been an impediment, obviously, to the Cardinals keeping him in games and keeping him in games for 9 innings. At times, that is something that has shown up again, and I think that there was the hope that it would show dramatic improvement over the offseason, and I'm not sure the extent to which that has happened. But the bat is good enough to keep in the lineup every single day. And I almost feel like, and again, we're going to see a little bit of time without him at this point, regardless of the position he's playing. I would like to see the Cardinals find a way. And I know Oliver Marmol's got a tough job there, getting him in the lineup as often as possible. He may be the best hitter on this team. I think he's probably like the 3rd best hitter on this team. I came in, Stefan, behind Wilson Contreras and Newt Barr were my two that I said I think are your top bats offensively. I've been impressed with Ivan Herrera offensively. I don't know how you couldn't be, but the defense is, I guess, an aspect maybe for the long haul that will have to be considered. But don't think that it's not being thought about out there in Cardinals land. Like, this is something that's being discussed behind the scenes, that the Cardinals are trying to find a way how to maximize their roster on an everyday basis. When he's healthy again, I think that will continue to be a conversation.
I agree. And I think that when you look at the Cardinals offensively, they're in the upper third of every category. This is what Brant Brown has done for this team. He's helped them kind of reawaken offensively. Remember, everybody last year was talking about this team as, hey, they can't hit, we can't score runs. Well, they're scoring runs. That has not been the issue. The issue has been with the pitching. And a reminder, they play the majority of their games at Busch Stadium, which has been known to be a pitcher's park, especially in those humid summer months where the ball just doesn't fly. So if they can find a way to string together hits, find a way to push across some runs, I think this team is going to be just fine. But they're entering a stretch of games where the teams are combined 20-17. That's Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Houston, New York. 3 of those 4 teams we know are pretty much unanimously talked about as potential postseason teams. So the Cardinals will really have to prove their mettle against those teams, and then we'll really see what kind of a group they are. Yes, not the best showing against Boston, but they're a couple outs away from a win and staying above 500 if they win Game 2 of the series, Game 1 of the doubleheader. And I think that if we kind of temper our expectations a little bit this early in the season, it'll be better off for the team in the long haul. They have dealt with some injuries. They are still dealing with a new roster, one that they're unfamiliar with. And Ollie Marmol is going to go and surprise people, I think, just like he did with that opening series. But again, how he assembles that lineup the next 3 days, I think will be really telling of what he is seeing out of this group moving forward.
And I think an aspect of this too, like, people talk a lot about bullpen management. My stance on that is, if a reliever blows it, it's going to be viewed as the manager's fault before it's going to be viewed as the reliever's fault. I would take this afternoon, for example. I understand that he let Ryan Helsley go pretty darn far, but I've covered Ollie Marmol long enough to know, like, he's not taking Ryan Helsley out of a situation. And of course, he ended up being 1 strike away from getting out of it. And so you can be frustrated and say, well, it was clear Ryan Helsley didn't have it. Yes, but he's also the best reliever in your bullpen. You're playing a doubleheader on this same day, and you don't have a ton of options out there. This isn't last year where you can say, let's go to Andrew Kittredge. Let's go to the options are a little bit less proven. I do like what I've seen so far out of Phil Maton, Stefan, but when you look at the bullpen, I think a name that kind of jumps out and maybe flies under the radar so far. Ryan Fernandez was viewed as a guy that was needing to take that big leap forward. And right now we're kind of seeing a little bit of regression from him. And the main thing is he's walked a batter in 4 consecutive appearances that he's had. The command was something that was pretty sturdy from him last year. And to be able to kind of siphon him into that 7th, 8th inning role, you're going to need to see that more consistent command from Ryan Fernandez. So it kind of goes into some of those aspects of it. Maybe Chris Roycroft builds off of the garbage time appearance he had tonight, because he's another guy that I think Oliver Marmol would love to see be reliable in those step forward opportunities when it comes to filling the bridge to the late innings, or perhaps getting Roycroft to become one of those guys that can become part of that late inning assembly line. But it's just one of those aspects that when it rains, it pours. You're having trouble in the rotation. You're having some trouble with finding out who those next relievers are going to be. And the best reliever in baseball just blew a save today. I mean, that's sort of kind of the long and short of it right now for the Cardinals.
I think that it's important to note, too, that this was a shorthanded relief for the Cardinals, especially considering the doubleheader. There aren't very many options outside of Helsley that Ollie Marmol would have liked to turn to in that situation. You go with your guy. When you have a pitcher that throws 103 miles an hour and a 90-mile-an-hour slider and was as effective as he was last season, and to a degree as effective as he has been in only a couple of outings, you stick with him there. Right? He almost got out of it. It was almost 4-3, a win for the Cardinals. And I know we don't deal in almosts, but this is a team that has the pieces to be good. The question is, can they do it? And I think that's what fans are a little bit concerned about. Can the Cardinals do it? Can they put it together? Can their young guys step up? Because by and large, they have offensively. It's been some of the veterans that have struggled in the early stages of the season. So I think that it's going to be a really, really fun ride to see where they go from here, but also a little bit scary considering the teams that they're going to stack up against over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's fair to be maybe cautiously optimistic because of what you have seen from the offense to this point, but also understand that there are some things that are going to have to be tidied up if the Cardinals are going to find their level. I'll give an example, though. When you talk about the situation with Helsley. He's your guy. You're going to see him through that, and that can also be something that builds confidence in a player. I want to use Mason Wynn as the example of that, Stefan, because it was just a number of days ago that there was some skepticism over, all right, there was an opportunity potentially to have somebody come off the bench to take an at-bat for Mason Wynn late. And the extent to which Nolan Gorman was already kind of nursing an injury, I'm not totally familiar. But that was the play on paper that some people saw. You look at what Ollie Marmol was trying to do in that spot, it wasn't really a question for him, I don't think, in that situation. He's saying Mason Wynn's my guy. Mason Wynn's not a guy that I'm pinch hitting for in virtually any situation. That's what Ollie Marmol saw in Mason Wynn when the batting average said 0-0-0. I just want to point out that over the last 4 games, Mason Wynn has had 4 2-hit games. He's got 8 hits over those past 4 games. So there is an element to this where you may see something outside and say, well, this is what the manager ought to be doing. I'm looking at it and saying, I understand why they're trying to say, like, this is our guy. This isn't really a difficult conversation. We believe in Mason Wynn. We believe in Ryan Helsley. And I think those are some managerial tactics that you'll consider to see, or continue to see rather, when, an outing, a moment in time may stack up against a player. I don't think that makes a manager wrong to say, that's still my guy. I'm still going to see him through that. And then I think Mason Wynn is the example of just a number of days later, we are seeing him be the hitter that we saw him be all year for the Cardinals in 2024. So it definitely feels rocky. Anytime you get swept by anybody, it's not going to feel good. In the circumstances of this one in Boston, I can understand why fans would have some frustration. It is going to come down to the pitching turning things around, but if and when that may happen, you can feel pretty good about the fact that the other elements of the roster are coming into form in a way that should allow the Cardinals to remain competitive.
Oh, you're right about Mason Wynn. 0 for 21 to start the season, 8 for 12 in his last 12 at-bats. I mean, that's exactly what you want to see from him. And he has to adjust to a new spot in the order. He was hitting leadoff the majority of the year last year. Now he's hitting in the 9th spot, not getting as many opportunities, not getting as many high-leverage, big moment opportunities like he would have last season. And I think he's coming through it nicely. He's raised his batting average tremendously. Jordan Walker is doing what he needs to do. The power is coming along a little bit. Victor Scott has played tremendously. So what I've likened it to for the Cardinals this year, and you can totally correct me if you disagree, is that this season is an audit of the Cardinals top to bottom. You try to figure out what you have, the value of each player, and giving as much runway as possible to guys like Nolan Gorman, to Jordan Walker, and to Mason Wynn. I don't think anybody really lumped him in with that group, but they were quick to do so as soon as he was struggling at the beginning of the season. So yes, he needs some leeway. He needs some runway in the same way that Walker does. He had a whole season's worth of success last year. You've heard of the sophomore slump. I don't think that's going to be the case for him this season. He's played tremendous defense, so he adds inherent value without there being a backup shortstop for the Cardinals. They trust that guy so much, and he's the cornerstone of the franchise at this point in time. But pitching-wise, I can understand why fans want guys like McGreevy, want guys like Quinn Matthews. But we've seen time and time again a lot of pitchers that get brought up too early. They aren't ready for that moment. We'll just have to wait and see how it all goes. But tonight just wasn't a great night for St. Louis, and I hope that tomorrow is a better one.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people in the chat would agree with that, Stefan. And to the point you're making about some of the young pitchers, and I think McGreevy has had a recent strong outing in AAA, and he's ready for the big leagues. We all understand that. But there is the aspect of get through April. I want to see Miles Mikolas a few starts in the month of April. I want to see what it looks like when Steven Matz gets back into the rotation. There's a lot of comments in the live chat here. Andrews is kind of applicable to this. He asked, doesn't it feel like this team needs to offload more in order to rebuild? If this team is really bad, would you at least trade Helsley? What about Contreras or Sonny Gray? What I would continue to reiterate is that the Cardinals are not presently in a rebuild. It's not a term that they've used. And when you look at their roster, that matches what we're seeing. They're trying to they trim the fat, right? And they're paying less for the players that are on this payroll right now. And yeah, they did try to trade away Arenado to the point of what Stefan was saying regarding Nolan Gorman, like trying to get young guys opportunity. But there is a desire within just about every facet of this organization to win this year. Whether or not they'll be successful in doing that does not negate that it is an effort that is being made from the field staff to the players to the front office trying to assemble the best roster. Like if there's not still an eye on trying to be competitive this season, they don't spend a couple mil on Phil Maton toward the very end of spring training. They're still trying to figure out ways to gain an edge and gain an advantage. However, like if you get into July, to the point of Andrew's question, and the standings reflect something that is not particularly competitive in St. Louis this year. Andrew, I do believe the Cardinals are going to be making that pivot at that point in time. Ryan Helsley, whatever his numbers are, if he's in the final year of his deal and there have not been extension talks, that's the time of year in which you start to see those trade talks materialize. Guys like Contreras and Sonny Gray, and we can circle back to Arenado, those guys have no trade clauses, and so conversations will be very intricate when it comes to that topic. But for right now, you do, I think, stay in the mindset, if you're the Cardinals, of planning for the long haul of the summer to be able to be competitive. And that includes trying to exhaust every last possibility of, can Miles Mikolas give you competitive innings this year? Can Steven Matz do that in the rotation? And those things are happening simultaneous to McGreevy, Quinn Matthews, prior to tonight, Graceffo and others ramping things up in AAA, so that if and when the time should come that you decide to begin making some roster moves, you have a little bit of latitude to be able to say, okay, we know the guys at the end of April or in mid-May who are most liable to help us immediately when it comes to the rotation.
And I think John Mozeliak has had the mentality of, I want to leave this organization in the best possible position for Chaim Bloom. There is a tremendous amount of respect for the Cardinal way, for what the Cardinals represent in Major League Baseball. And I think that's what we're going to see a little bit. But this, again, is not a team that has gone out and been shut out every game. It's not a team that has really struggled offensively. I think in every area that fans had questioned the Cardinals' success last year, they've kind of flipped the script this year. Yes, the pitching has struggled, but this team can go out and score runs. That's something they didn't have last year. So look at that as a positive. Mason Wynn continues to hit. Jordan Walker continues to hit. Players that they're trying to develop for the future, maybe not looking in the short term, but in the long term, this is a very, very good thing for St. Louis and a very, very good thing for the Cardinals fans. But I think that the fans are right in the sense that they have to be realistic about who they are, what they are, and where they're going to be come June and July. This is a very, very difficult time to be in the National League. I think that goes without saying. This is a pretty wide open division as compared to the other two. The NL East have the Braves, the Phillies, the Mets, duking it out typically every single year. The Cardinals have the Cubs, the Brewers, and of course St. Louis. They're the top three dogs that have been fighting it out for the last 2 decades. And of course the West, Dodgers, Padres, and Diamondbacks. But it seems like a foregone conclusion. I said this earlier with Joe Roderick, that the Dodgers are projected to win the division. They're projected to win the World Series. You imagine the Diamondbacks and Padres with those offenses, that pitching staff, they will be 2 of the wild card spots. A wild card spot is a luxury that the Cardinals can't really bank on right now. It needs to be win the division or bust. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think when you look at the competitiveness of those other divisions, Stefan, and the Braves have not gotten off to the start that they were hoping for. Let's see where they're at in August, September, because I have to imagine the Atlanta Braves are going to be in the mix, just like they are each and every year. The Phillies and Mets have some really good lineups. They have some good pitching to project as playoff type teams. And then you look out west, yeah, the Dodgers are going to win that division, but the Padres have a very competitive roster. The Diamondbacks have been able to do more with less in recent years. And so I just don't really think you can ever count out the Giants either. It's just going to be one of those situations where it wouldn't be too surprising to see the NL Central only get one team. The concern with that, though, Stefan, right now could be the Cubs are starting to look like they might be legitimate. And they were projected to take a step forward with the moves they made in the offseason. I think Kyle Tucker has been able to pretty much count on his homers like the train schedule recently with what he's been doing. They added a really good player in him. Yeah, they gave up a really good prospect in Cam Smith, who already got the call from the Astros. But we may have to just accept in St. Louis that the Cubs every once in a while are going to get one of those years, and this could potentially be one of those years. But I do think if you're the Cardinals and you can do the things that, make you successful on the offensive side and find a way to gain that edge on the pitching side, get yourself into the mid-80s in a win total and throw your name in the ring and see what happens. Could still be in play, but also we're going to keep an eye on those Cubbies, because if they take off and look like nobody's very likely to catch them, that could force the Cardinals into maybe a little bit more of an early reassessment of the situation over the summer. They're auditing for sure for 2026 and beyond, but I also think on a micro scale, that's something that will have to happen as this season goes along when it comes to some of your expiring contracts and how the front office wants to approach them.
You're right about the Cubs. They have looked like world beaters over the last few games, and more are coming. Their farm system is the elite of the elite. Owen Casey, guys like that are coming up through the system. James Triantos. They have pitchers offensive players at every position that can really help that team. And they've done a really nice job of rebuilding and turning things around. But the Cardinals are in the midst of that. They're not in a rebuild. They're in a refresh, I think is the way of looking at it. They're trying to take a good look at their young players and see what they can do. And that's going to be a lot of fun and maybe not so fun at certain times this season. But remember, this is not a team filled with Paul Goldschmidt, with Nolan Arenado at the beginning of their Cardinals careers. It's a team with guys like Brendan Donovan, a team with guys like Victor Scott, who fans were demanding were in the lineup come spring training. Well, they've gotten most of what they've wished for in terms of how the roster has been assembled. It just hasn't quite gone the way that they had hoped over the last week and a half. It started off great, and I think that 3-0 really got people's expectations up a little bit high, and I think that we're seeing maybe a bit of an overreaction because of how well they started, but there's still plenty to be excited about with this team. I wouldn't write them off even a little bit. You look at, again, the later innings of this game, they can turn it on when they want to, and I think that's going to be something that's characteristic of this Redbirds team here in 2025.
I just think they have to be passable when it comes to pitching. Like, the pitching doesn't need to carry this team, but it has to find a floor. And look, that was part of the concern level when you let guys like Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn walk. Those were the guys that you brought in last year to kind of stabilize a rotation for which the bottom fell out in 2023. You had a bunch of dudes at the end of the season just filling out innings, and it was not necessarily with a mind that the team was going to be successful. Last year, they said, we can't let that happen again, and they brought in guys that made sure it didn't. But the Cardinals won 83 games, and that wasn't quite enough to get them over the hump, and so the organization made the difficult decision to say, we have to kind of take a step back before we can move forward. We'll see what that ends up looking like, and certainly the players on this roster are saying it doesn't necessarily have to mean a step back in the standings if we do our jobs, but you are looking at a pitching staff where you're relying on guys that maybe aren't quite as proven when 40% of your rotation are Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, guys who take the ball, and look, even if they give up 5 runs in the second inning, they're probably getting through 6 innings, allowing 5 or 6 runs. Like, that's kind of what we saw from those guys. And you have to question whether or not this is a group that's going to be able to hold up that mantle. So far, I would say that that's not necessarily been the case. And so you have to kind of look and say, hopefully they can find a way to turn that around. And if not, you have the young pitchers that may supplant some of the guys in the rotation as the year goes along, if that can't be the case. But I would agree with the notion of optimism, because I don't think very many people, even if you were looking at it on the bright side in terms of what the offense could be, I don't think very many people saw this type of start where I don't think there's been a day where we've gone, oh my gosh, this lineup. I mean, they just couldn't come through, and the pitcher was hittable, and they let him off the hook. They've been pretty consistent with what they've been doing offensively. And so, yes, the pitching is a problem. And if it continues to be a problem, we're going to have to change the scope of our conversation. But for the time being, yeah, go play a Pittsburgh team that you hopefully have a chance to do something with. The comment here says that I am basically suggesting to accept the losing. Not my suggestion at all. Losing could happen. Look, if the pitching doesn't turn it around, I'm not saying this is going to be a productive summer, but the audit is ongoing, Stefan, as you mentioned. And I think there is a realm in which whatever happens this season, you may find that the Cardinals make better decisions about what they look like moving forward as a result of the data that they're able to gather over the next 5 months.
Yeah, I don't think that the walls are closing in just yet. And I think that it's crazy to suggest that they are 9 games into the season. This is a 162 game season. You can go on a run. You can get things going. It is a difficult stretch of games, but aren't you glad you're getting some of those games out of the way early when your offense has been playing as well as they have? Yes, the pitching is struggling, but you are going to have games where the offense breaks out for 10 runs a game, 7 runs a game. I mean, what's your magic number offensively that you feel like the Cardinals need to get to in terms of runs per game in order to give themselves a good chance to win? Right now, feels like that number is around 6 or 7 in order to win a game, but that's a lot to ask on a day-to-day basis. They're certainly getting their hits. They haven't necessarily gone in the direction of runs all the time, but it's good to have as much depth as the Cardinals have offensively. You can just play Big 12 football if you really want to compare it to something, likening it to Big 12 football. Score a lot of runs. I think the Cardinals are kind of that team right now, because the only teams that are leading them in those offensive categories are the Yankees, Cubs, Diamondbacks, Dodgers, all teams that are projected to be postseason teams in 2025. So they're in with with those good groups.
Yeah, I think to your question, last year I thought, can the Cardinals be an offense that gets you like 5 runs a game? I think they had the pitching staff to be able to get, 6 innings, 4 runs allowed, and the bullpen clean it up and win a lot of games 5-4, 6-5. You're right, though. This year, at least early on, it does feel like 6, 7, maybe more. Today would have been 19. That would have been applicable to be able to find a way to win these games. And I know we're kind of in jest about that, but yeah, that is sort of the name of the game. What's crazy is I think this Cardinal offense might be able to do it. It hurts to not have Herrera, but that is an aspect of this where it's like, if they have a top 5, top 8, top 10 offense in the league, you're not going to need quite as much from the other aspects of the team if you ultimately want to find the Cardinals making some hay this summer, which there is still time to do. I do recommend starting with the Pittsburgh Pirates tomorrow, though. That's a team that you can get and certainly can in game 1 when it's not Skeens and it's not Mitch Keller on the other side.
Well, it's so much more satisfying because it's an in-division opponent. And I think it's important to touch on this Ivan Herrera update that he's going to be back soon. That's from Katie Wu of The Athletic. He doesn't believe he's going to have a crazy recovery, which is good. I know that a lot of the fans were watching on ESPN, and Ollie Marmol said that it was a lot better than it could have been. As we expected, Pedro Paja is going to take on the majority of the catching for now. But it looks like, as we were talking about, the backup is going to be Joel Pozo, which is good. He had a really good spring, lots of power, right-handed hitter, made his major league debut in 2021. So you add some experience and stability. You lose a lot offensively, but again, you have a player in Pedro Pajes that is contributing when his name is called. So I think the Cardinals are not better off by any means, but I think it makes some decisions a little bit easier for Ollie Marmol, considering that some of these players that have been out via injury or otherwise dispatched from the team, Marmol doesn't have to think as much about who he's going to put in there day to day. It was a tough decision, I'm sure, the first week of the season. How do you get everybody at bats?
Yeah, now it's pretty simple, right, Stefan? You're going to look at it and say, Pedro Pajes, it's yours until you need a break. And then they'll put Pozo in as the catcher on those days and get him acclimated to this pitching staff. And then, yeah, there's no feeling bad about Nolan Gorman, needing opportunities. He's obviously on the injured list as well. It's not what you wanted, but it's kind of what we have said all along is likely going to be the way that these things get resolved. You're going to have injuries. And unfortunately, the Cardinals are getting hit by them in, the first week of April, and it's a lot sooner than anybody would have hoped to have seen that happen, but here it is. And so what that says to the rest of the players in that lineup is, all right, you're in there, go get them. And I think that's where the Cardinals are about to be. And we'll hope that they're continuing to find their level offensively, as a number of them have.
And thank goodness it's another righty. The Cardinals have a ton of lefties. I think that a little bit more balance is going to help St. Louis in their lineup. Ethan Hannaford says that he likes Pajes a lot. I trust him. Ethan's a trustworthy guy. But he says he knows how to handle this staff, which is absolutely true. You look at the numbers, he has been one of the better defensive catchers that the Cardinals have had since the departure of Yadier Molina. His arm has been second to none on the Cardinals staff. Just really being able to control that run game is of paramount importance, especially with pitchers that are a little bit slower to the plate. He can help. And when other teams have gotten runners in scoring position, St. Louis has kind of been able to stymie them a bit. And I think that with a team that is struggling to pitch, is struggling to keep the runs from scoring for the opposition, keeping them out of scoring position is going to be extremely important for St. Louis moving forward.
Yeah, giving the pitching staff any kind of boost that they can get when the offense has proven that they're able to kind of handle the load right now, I think it is something that makes sense. Look, they were finding reasons to get Pedro Pajes into the daily lineup even before the Herrera injury, and so I don't think it will be particularly difficult on Oliver Marmol to write his name as often as he possibly can and just try to find a way through this period of time where hopefully it's more like weeks than months that we're measuring this Ivan Herrera absence. And obviously there with the report from Katie Wu, hopefully that does end up being the case.
Well, I trust Katie Wu's investigative journalism. I'm sure that she'll be certainly getting us more information as time goes on. Tomorrow should be a whole lot of fun with the Cardinals against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Start of a 3-game series, the end of the road trip. Mlodzinski will face off against Liberatore. That's going to be a really, really good matchup. Mlodzinski had a really, really tough outing. He's 0-1 with a 9.82 ERA. So the Cardinals bat should be able to get after him. I'm sure they will be at least a little bit motivated to be on the giving end of a big win rather than the receiving end of a big loss like they were last night.
And I'm excited to see more Matthew Liberatore because, again, I think him kind of taking the bull by the horn, Stefan, is something that could really help this rotation, this pitching staff at large. And this is a role and an opportunity that he has coveted for some time. And this is really going to be his chance to run with it. So I'm eager to see how he does in start number 2 of the season.
I can't wait either. And Brenden, thanks again so much for having me. Matthew back there, Matthew Rocchio, thank you for making this go so smoothly. You have any final thoughts before we call it a night here from the Hub?
Final thoughts is the Monday game is going to be the easiest to win in Pittsburgh, just looking at the pitching matchups and the way that has played out. Not to say that Sonny Gray can't take somebody on, but Paul Skeens is one of the toughest arms you'll see. I think Mitch Keller is a pretty good arm as well. So try to jump out early. I think tomorrow would be the name of the game to show, the weekend in Boston happened, but it doesn't have to be something that defines this Cardinals team. And I think it's going to be the lineup, frankly, that has an opportunity to show that in the top of the first inning tomorrow.
Well, if there is a team that Skeens has been on the receiving end of a loss against, it is the St. Louis Cardinals, which is a plus. So Cardinals have seen him before. A lot of these veteran hitters, if you can even call it that, the 26-year-olds on this team that have faced Skeens will be familiar with what he's got cooking. But he is certainly looking to be the Cy Young Award winner in the NL. I'm excited to see how that plays out. But this was a whole lot of fun. I can't wait to be here and cover it, hopefully with you again. And this is great. Love the Sports Hub STL, and for my second show, you made it so great.
Oh, appreciate it. It was awesome working with you, Stefan. More to come, and make sure you hit that subscribe button on Sports Hub STL, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Lots of Cardinals coverage coming all summer long, so make sure you guys stay tuned.